Oh, hello, vegans, vegetarians, and vegicurious folk, and welcome to my corner of the internet. Today we're going to be talking all things umami, what it is, why we like it, how you can use it, and then we're going to go through 10 plant-based sources of umami. A lot of what we perceive of as taste is actually smell. The zestiness of an orange, the chocolatey notes in your coffee, or the garden freshness of a ripe green pea. There are actually only 5 flavors that we have taste buds for on our tongue: salty, sweet, sour, bitter, and umami. In the end, a combination of smell and taste lead us to the complex experience that we call flavor. Umami is actually the flavor of glutamate, which is an amino acid or a protein. It is the most newly discovered of all the tastes, and it's described as savory and meaty with a very deep flavor. Because there are taste buds for umami all over the surface of your tongue, it spreads through your mouth and lingers, giving you a mouth-watering feeling. A lot of the time, ingredients that have a lot of umami flavor are dried or fermented because those processes can break down proteins and release the glutamate. I use umami flavors a lot in my cooking, but I think that they're especially important when making vegan cheeses and mock meats. I do make a lot of vegan cheeses myself and a lot of mock meats, especially the wheat-based ones called seitan. I find the key to integrating umami flavors well into those dishes is to use 2 or 3 sources of umami. That way, your mouth gets a really complex, deep umami flavor rather than just immediately recognizing the single source of umami you used. And that leads us really nicely into the 10 umami flavor bombs that I promised you. Let's get started, in no particular order. Soy sauce. Soy sauce is probably the umami boost I use most often. It's made from fermented soybeans and packs a lot of umami and salt. Additionally, there are some sweet and caramel-like notes. I use soy sauce in marinades, sauces, when making seitan, and more. It's especially good if you're trying to mimic a beefy flavor. You do want to keep in mind that soy sauce is really high in salt, and make sure that you balance it out with any other salt you're using. Additionally, if you're avoiding gluten, you need to be careful with soy sauce. Most brands contain wheat, although you can find gluten-free options if you look. Miso paste. Miso is another fermented soy product. Although if you're looking for a soy-free option, you can get miso paste made with chickpeas, rice, adzuki beans, and more. Miso comes in different shades, from a light blondish color to almost black. The darker the miso, the longer it's been fermented, and the funkier and richer it tastes. Miso is funky, salty, sweet, and umami. I like to use it in dressings, on roasted vegetables, and in both vegan cheeses and vegan meats. I most often use a lighter miso. I find it to be really good for making a vegan chicken alternative. Miso paste is also really amazing in sweets. The added saltiness and umami in caramel or cookies makes a really complex and craveable dessert. Nutritional yeast. Nutritional yeast is a form of deactivated yeast that has a whole lot of umami, as well as cheese-like flavors, and a little bit of nuttiness. A lot of the time it comes enriched with vitamin B12, which is something that most of us Americans are deficient in. Nutritional yeast is a must-have for vegan cheeses and cheesy sauces. I also like to use smaller amounts of it in my seitans and other meat alternatives. Nutritional yeast tastes salty, but it's actually salt-free, so it's a great one to pair with miso or another saltier umami source. Probably the simplest and most addictive way I eat nutritional yeast is sprinkled on amply buttered toast. Dried mushrooms. Mushrooms are a great source of umami, but not all mushrooms are created equally. Shiitakes and porcinis are a couple of my favorites. Fresh mushrooms have a good amount of umami as well, but cooking or drying really helps to enhance those flavors. Mushrooms are naturally low in salt, which means that they can be paired with saltier dishes. I love to add dried mushrooms to broths to really add flavor, or to grind them up and use it as a seasoning. When I use them in vegan meats, it tends to be in conjunction with some soy sauce, often mimicking a darker meat. Fermented tofu. Fermented tofu makes the best vegan cheese. In fact, if you've ever had the brand Chow, it's made with fermented tofu. Fermented tofu is salty, savory, and funky. The fermented flavor is incredibly strong. I like to blend it with other things in smaller amounts because a little bit goes a long way. Fermented tofu is creamy and doesn't have that same structural integrity as non-fermented tofu. Look for fermented tofu at Asian grocery stores. You can get them in jars. Although I usually use my fermented tofu for making vegan cheeses, I've also made very simple creamy sauces to go over my cooked greens. Tomato paste. Tomatoes are naturally very high in glutamate, but dried tomatoes and tomato paste have even more of those umami flavors concentrated. You can get even more umami flavor out of tomato paste by cooking and browning it. Tomato paste itself is pretty low in salt, which means that it can be paired with saltier umami sources. Tomatoes also have a very distinctive flavor that we know well, bright, acidic, and sweet. Because of that, if I'm not really leaning into that tomato flavor, I try and use it sparingly. When making seitan, I use tomato paste most often in making sausages or hams. I also really like to incorporate a little bit into Mexican-style marinades. Seaweed. Seaweeds, or sea vegetables as some prefer, are another place where umami shines. Some seaweeds have almost no umami to them, like Irish moss, but others contain tons. Great sources for glutamate in seaweed include kombu and dulse, two of my favorites. Sea vegetables all taste a little different, but in general they have a salty, fishy, somewhat metallic, oceany flavor. I most often use seaweeds in broths, and naturally when I'm mimicking a fish-like flavor. From my vegan fishless fillets to a no-tuna salad, you will find that I use seaweed for umami whenever I want it to taste like the ocean. Umeboshi paste. This is another one of my favorite umami bombs. Umeboshi is a Japanese pickled ume plum. They're intensely sour, salty, and umami. You can buy the small plums whole, they're about the size of a marble, but I like to get it as a paste. Umeboshi is my go-to ingredient to use instead of using something like anchovies or salted shrimp. I really like to add it to salad dressings because it makes the lettuce go from meh to amazing in a way that nothing else really does. Umeboshi is the key ingredient in my Caesar salad dressing recipe. Black garlic. Black garlic is a fermented garlic that has a sweet, earthy, and mild flavor. A lot more mild than many of these umami bombs. It tastes caramelly and, of course, like garlic. I have sometimes used it in vegan meats, but the delicate flavor can get lost. It also works really well in vegan cheeses, though, giving your cheese a special sweet, savory, garlicky flavor. I've made the most amazing vegan brie that was flavored with black garlic. Black garlic is also really good when paired with mushrooms, smeared on bread, and made into a homemade hummus. Monosodium glutamate. There's a lot of misinformation around monosodium glutamate, also called MSG, and unfortunately a lot of that comes from a history of anti-Asian racism. Studies have shown that MSG is the same as glutamate naturally occurring in foods, and it's processed by our bodies the same way. The FDA and many other food safety organizations have determined that MSG is generally recognized as safe. If you're still not convinced, that is your own business, but if you are looking for a really basic form of umami, MSG is here. If you think of sugar as a straight form of sweetness and table salt as a purely salty flavor, MSG is the equivalent in umami. Honestly, I don't use MSG all that much, but I always have some around. Most of the time, there is another umami bomb from this list that not only delivers the umami, but adds another flavor as well, and I'd usually rather use that. But this does work really well as a great finisher for a dish when you taste it and you feel like it's just missing that little bit of umami richness. That's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching. I know there's a multitude of content on the internet that you can put your eyeballs on, so I really appreciate you, your eyeballs, and your brain cells being here with me today. If you liked this video, go on and give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you want to see the next time that we post. I also really hope you'll share your favorite plant-based umami bombs down in the comments below. Until next time, be a good person and enjoy those glutamates. Bye-bye.